I tell my kids, even if you want to be a monk, go make billions so you can help the temple. That's probably one of the best ways you can help the temple.
I love that.
I had kids that came and said, hey, we're like 5 of us. We have this car washing business. And I think one of us is stealing the money. What should we do? How do we deal? How do we deal with that?
Real life is real life everywhere. Yeah. Hi, I'm Tony Cooper, host of the Dad Manual podcast, and I'm here today with someone I'm really excited to talk to. Jay, will you introduce yourself?
Oh, hi. My name is Jay Bourgana. I'm a great dad, and I have some wisdom to share.
Why I'm really excited about our conversation is I don't know that I've ever met anybody who's taken his parenting responsibilities so seriously, like specifically in the area of developing your children to become really powerful adults in the world. I think you take an angle that's really focused around business acumen and understanding how the world works, and also, who you get to be as a dad. But what's really amazing is how you're really sharing it in real time with other dads, not waiting till the end of your fathering journey like I've done with this podcast. So, Jay, you're the founder and creator and leader of a pretty large community of actively engaged dads who are learning from you, learning from each other. It's called Raising Lions. How old are your kids right now?
They're 10 and 12.
10, 12. And how long has Raising Lions been going on?
I would say 2-3 years.
Okay, right. Perfect. So this is something you just got started before they even turned double digits. And so, tell me about Raising Lions.
Yeah, so Raising Lions is a community that grew organically through me just sharing my stories with raising my kids from essentially first principle, doing things differently. As I'm part of a lot of different communities that are business oriented or health oriented, and I meet a lot of dads all the time, and they always ask me kind of where I moved from or where my kids go to school, and I'll say something like, oh, my kids are homeschooled. And then usually the question is, how do you do with socialization? And then I explain my socialization formula for kids. And then people kind of lean in. And then we go into having conversations about how to build resilience and how to develop responsibility in kids and how to develop self-sufficiency and how to get kids to be, intentional and responsible for their own happiness. And after that, it's like 2-3 hours that gone by from that conversation. So I felt that a lot of dads wanted to hear those stories. And my daily ritual is I spend 2 hours with my kids every morning from 7 to 9. They come down, they make their breakfast, and they sit with me outside in the backyard. And we have conversations that organically start, with something like, hey, what are you excited about today? Or, what's going on? What happened yesterday at jiu-jitsu, whatever. And then that will initiate the conversation. By the end of it, we're talking about Federal Reserve, monetary policy, or we're talking about the war in Iran, or we're talking about some serious, or business or some acquisition or something. So it always kind of like organically flows that way. And there's always a theme in the middle of that conversation that I usually think it's interesting to share with the group. And I usually would summarize that bite, that little piece of, conversation. I'll share it with the group. Yeah. And I found that people find it interesting and people are finding it useful, and, dads engaged, they share, they bring each other into the group. And I met, some parents today, for lunch, and a lot of them were telling me, I don't participate that much in the group, but I really appreciate the stories and I appreciate that thing. And I'm inspired by this or that, which I have great gratitude for.
Yeah, it is a very active group. I'm blessed to be part of it. It's concepts around fathering, such real world, practical adult points of view, but packaged in a way that is delivered to and makes sense to children and empowering dads. It's actually a pretty active group. For a number of groups I've seen, it's a bane of my existence where I open up my WhatsApp. I'm like, 50 messages I've missed. Oh my God. And that's not even a full day. So, that's the huge reflection of the value of what's being delivered and the impact it's making. I didn't realize that a lot of what you're putting in is the result of the conversations you're having each morning with your kids. And so they're really fresh, they're really topical. It does feel like you're pulling from an encyclopedia of knowledge, but I love that it's actually being generated in relationship with your kids. So, how much
Yes.
of that is what you're bringing to the table versus what they're hungry for? Like, what's it look like around the breakfast with you and your
Yeah, it
kids?
all depends. So some days, there's some need or there's some challenge. There's some real problems that we have to work through. Yeah, and then that's kind of what starts the conversation. Sometimes it's just evolved into that theme, and sometimes there are things that it takes me maybe like a month to work through for myself, and then to
Right.
figure out, okay, how can I take my daughter who's getting into her tween years to understand certain things, or to accept advice, or to not push too hard as she's going through her separation, or see her mom's point of view, or so forth. So there's some things that are like we wrestle with over a period of time. There's some things that come in the moment that someone comes in and they have this challenge, or that they express by me probing. And then sometimes just, a theme that shows up,
Yeah.
that day.
And it's anything in life. Like, it's whatever a 10 or a 12-year-old this moment is, whatever on their mind, you get to dig in and
Yes.
uncover, uncover, uncover. There's a lot in what you put forth that's around entrepreneurialism. I would love to hear, like, what was your path and what's the impact been in your life? And I guess there's an interesting question in my mind, which is the whole nature versus nurture aspect of this. How much of the entrepreneurial spirit that's in your kids do you think it's just they're naturally arising out of them, or is it they see you walking a particular path that you normalize it or you make it exciting or whatever it might be? I'm curious about that dynamic in your family.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some nature element. There's a certain drive. There's certain, every kid has a certain superpower. They have, they may have this artistic component to them, and that could be like a product person, or they can be vocal and verbal, and that could be leadership, or it could be sales, or they can be social, and that can be sales, or it could be a little bit lazy smart, and that could be systems. So every kid has that in them, but it doesn't really translate into entrepreneurship unless you put it in the environment, or you force that superpower, that energy, that skill to go toward entrepreneurship. So the entrepreneurial piece is really separate from the natural tendency of the kid. So for me, it was more, yes, there is a nature element to each one. So for me, my daughter is very verbal. She wants to be in control. She wants to be in charge. She's the kid that wants to be in charge. So that's a leadership kind of tendencies. My son is a lazy smart, so he's like a systems guy. How can I do this in a way where I don't have to do it, where it's done without me doing it, and so forth. So that's a system tendency. And so each one have a secondary trend. So if my daughter likes to be in charge, so that leadership piece, but also she likes to sell. So because they kind of work together. My son is a product person as well as a systems person. I mean, he can force himself to do certain things, but those are the two that are like really his strengths. Now, how do you get them to channel those things into, entrepreneurship is through kind of putting them in Girl Scout troops, or asking them to, do jobs within the house to get paid for, or, like you start small, you start with these little things and you make them earn money, and they like the concept of like, oh, I can do something and earn some capital. And
And
then you teach.
you're like a big lemonade stand cookie
Yeah,
guy. Yeah.
yeah,
Which I think
exactly.
is the ultimate like first exploration for a kid. And some kids love that. Some kids are like, I can't be bothered.
Yeah, and I think you can create incentives. Kids tend to love things that make them look great in front of their parents, especially at the younger age. They want to make
Mm.
their parents proud. So whatever you get excited, they get excited. So if they're getting a reaction out of you, especially at that early age, they want to do more of it. And so if you're encouraging it, it's like, oh, every time they go do a big sale and they sell out, then we go get a pizza. They hit a goal, then we go celebrate. Like they get, we did $300 this week. Great. That's the goal. Let's go celebrate.
Yeah.
go to the thing and their favorite place or favorite ice cream place or whatever. There, it creates this incentive, this dopamine hit that,
Right.
to achieve the thing that get our parents excited. So same thing when they get they do jujitsu, so they're locked into the sport. They can't quit the sport, but every time they go a new belt, there's an excitement, there's a celebration, there's they get a we go to the Brazilian bakery and get some
Mhm.
whatever they want, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's like the price, so they get excited for the next belt. So for me, I've always had these like frameworks or like verticals. We have everything we do throughout the day has to move the needle on health, wealth, and relationships. So on our health side, there might be sport, there might be some activity, some things that happens every day. On wealth, we got to do generate revenue or invest capital. And then on the relationship side, it could be just sending an email to a friend that we haven't seen in a while and so forth. So
Yeah.
there are these three goals that are constantly being looked at on the daily base, and we move in on the quarterly base. So business for me is an easy way for kids to develop responsibility, because you're going to go out there and you're going to take action. And then the things you take action are going to deliver results. And then some days they're going to be sales, and some days they're not going to be sales.
Yeah.
It's no one's fault. It's just that's what it is. So what do? We go back again. If today didn't work, great. Let's go back again. If it doesn't work again 3 or 4 times, well, maybe we need to tweak the approach. Maybe we need to change the
Right.
product. Maybe we need to change the price. Maybe we change the location. A lot of things we can do to change outcomes and improve our situation. And it's all on us. There's no one else.
Yeah.
There's not my parents' fault. It's not the weather's fault. It's not the
Yeah.
customer's fault. It's on us. We can change. We can go with a menu of products and $1, $2, $3, and then 2 weeks later we can change that to 5, 10, and 15.
Right.
And then with the same number of customers, now we're generating 3 times the revenue and 5 times the profit. I'm like, oh my God, I had this change in pricing strategy, and that, generated this much. So I have
Right.
power. I can make an impact on something on the positive side as well as on negative side. And sometimes things just don't work out. It's fine.
Right.
Go again
Right.
and do it again. So I think business is one of the unique places where kids can learn what the real world is about, and they're going out to sell to strangers. So either the strangers are going to like the stuff or don't like the stuff.
Right.
You know
Right.
what I mean? It's not like
Yeah.
parents or family, they're going to like, give you gifts on birthdays and stuff. You don't learn anything on the birthday party, but you learn a lot when you put a lemonade stand or a cookie stand out in the
Right.
neighborhood.
Yeah. You have a real genius around taking very complicated adult concepts and packaging them in such a way that they're learning opportunities and encouragement of growth for children. That's a big deal. We oftentimes try to package our adult perspective into and make kids understand it. You have a way of packaging it. The lessons in that of what you were just sharing as somebody who, coaches business executives for a living, the idea that you get to commit to an outcome, you get to create a vision or a declaration about the future, and then you hold very loosely to the strategy.
Yeah.
Like the strategy is simply a generalized thought idea about how we could get there. But what I'm hearing is like having them pay attention moment by moment to what's working and what's not working. If it's working, keep doing it. If it's not, change it. Be creative. What could it be? Now, also dealing with those things not as setbacks, but
Yes.
actually as the path forward. That's enormous. If your kids get nothing else out of any of this experience or any of the dads in raising lions, one thing I wanted to just dig in a little bit where you said, okay, the three things every day in your family that are non negotiable. So we make movement towards health, wealth, and relationships. I'm imagining the first and the last are pretty easy for a kid to wrap their head around. Relationships are, their friends and the family and everything. Health is like feeling good. So they're very easy to translate that. But wealth is sort of an interesting adulty kind of concept that probably has a couple of different sources. One could be total fear, scarcity, like I need it in order to create security for the future, is like a path toward wanting to generate wealth. And then another is like just pure vision, like from wealth what we can create is, like using it as a vehicle. I think that as just an adult, those are interesting ways to comprehend it. So what's your packaging of that concept of wealth for pre-teens,
Yeah.
so that it really lands with them?
Yeah, there's a great book by Daniel Pink called Drive, and he talks about how most people all over the world are motivated by three things: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And autonomy is a big one. For kids, it's the same thing. So, number one, autonomy. They want freedom. They want to be able to do what they want to do anywhere, anytime. Everybody loves freedom, and kids want
Right.
freedom. So
Yeah.
one of the ways adults get freedom, we talk about financial freedom, is by being able to be self-sufficient, to be able to take care of themselves, to be able to take care of others, be able to reinvest capital into assets that pay you when you're sleeping or when whatever, to be able to have enough abundance to help yourself and help others. That's kind of like the concept. Even if you don't want to help yourself, even if you want to live like a monk and give yourself infinite runway, be able to help others. I tell my kids, even if you want to be a monk, go make billions so you can help the temple. That's the probably one of the best ways you can help the temple.
I love
And
that.
then you have purpose and you have mastery. So through that pursuit of generating revenue, on wealth you have generating revenue, generating capital, and then allocating that capital. The allocation capital is easy. You can teach it to the kids. You can teach the risk reward. Take as much risk as you can when you're young. Take a little risk, later once you have kids and you have your family. But until you have kids, just go crazy on risk and allocate toward things that are like, high risk, high reward. But then on the revenue side is the one where it needs a little bit more pattern recognition, a little bit more, skill development and so forth. So in the revenue part, that's a constant mastery. That's a constant learning. You're constantly trying, testing, experimenting. When you talk about these, failures, those are not failures. They're just experiments. So we did this and this worked and didn't work. Okay, great. Let's do more of the thing that worked, less the things that didn't work, and then let's try something else. And so we're constantly experimenting. It's never ending. The experimentation never ending. Therefore, the learning never ends. And then we can do this not necessarily just about being out there selling, but also, learning about stuff, reading a book about, I don't know, Rich Dad Poor Dad, or reading, something about nuclear power, or reading
Yeah.
something about robotics. So whatever it is, it's going to give you more skills and more tools in your tool belt. So that's, kind of like the mastery component. So you got the autonomy, mastery, and then you have purpose. So purpose
Right.
is very important. I think a lot of parents and a lot of adults don't give that a lot of time. I mean, I see it even in companies. And if you consult with companies, a lot of times, you can ask people, "What's the point? What do we do here?"
Yeah.
And they can't give you, like I say, "Oh, we make this widget, or we sell that widget, or we sell this service or that service." But what is the point? What is the raison d'être? What is the reason to exist? What is the job to be done in the world for that service or that product? You probably can ask, everybody. No one will tell you the answer. Even the founder himself can tell you the answer, because they're so stuck in the weed. They kind of lose sense of like, what is the reason for this thing to exist? And it could
Right.
be a big purpose that changes the world just by, obviously changing the life of one person, one community and so forth. It can have an impact on the whole world, but no one is expressing that. No one is communicating that purpose to the individual workers. So I used to do that with my companies. I want to do it with my kids. I want to give them a sense of purpose in the world, a big
Right.
vision for what they do, what they impact. So that kind of drives them. It gives them that internal drive, toward doing something that matter. I have an impact on the world. I can do stuff, even if I may be 10, but I can make a world a better place. So to me, I'm always working on those three things: the, purpose, mastery, and
Yeah.
autonomy. Autonomy is very attractive for kids. What I mean? So especially for teens or tweens, they
Yeah.
really want that freedom. So, in order for you to earn that freedom, total freedom, what do you need? Again, you need total responsibility for your own life, responsibility for outcomes,
Yeah.
responsibility for your own happiness, responsibility for everything. So you have to be, resilient, self-reliant. You have to be reliable, and you're making good decisions. Listen, any parents will give more freedom to a kid who's making great decisions. It's just a no-brainer. I mean, you could explain it to them. Even kids can understand. Now, I'll tell like my 12-year-old or 10-year-old, listen, if you see a 2-year old that comes out of the house and runs to the street in a busy street, would you let that kid loose by himself to, run around the street or, go on the bike, whatever? You wouldn't. But if the kid is, careful and reasonable, and then comes out and waits for his mom and then walks next to her, the mom doesn't need to hold his hand. She'll let him run. She knows he's responsible. He's not gonna go across the street, or he's not gonna go get himself killed.
Right.
So
Right.
that's kind of like, I give them like a view that they can visualize for themselves. And it's the
Right.
same thing applies for them. If they make good decisions, if they don't go to the metaphoric, busy street, they're gonna have more responsibility. They're gonna have loose guidelines. They're gonna be able to do things, experiment, and have a lot more space to do things.
Yeah. The purpose thing is such an important part of it all. And I think you're right. From a business perspective, that seems to be the last thing people put their attention on.
Yes.
It feels superfluous in some sort of way. And yet it's the only thing that gets an organization to work together. So people always ask me, like, who do you like to work with? You work with for-profit companies, nonprofit companies? And I was like, I do my best work for purpose organizations. And typically what that looks like is, if I'm working with a nonprofit, the breakthrough is getting them to think like a business.
Yeah.
And if I'm working with a business, a very commercially focused business, the opportunity is, again, to think more like a nonprofit, the impact you're making on the world. Why do you get out of bed? And when you go,
Yeah.
what's your business about? And the answer can't be making money. What would you say? And that's
Right.
where people get stumped. And so the idea that you're starting to build that conversation at a child level, how quickly have you found that kids connect to the purpose conversation, and how much is that something that you really have to get them to understand?
No, they connect very quickly. Kids are very intuitive. I mean, they want to save the animals, they want to save the environment. They have this like natural need to connect with nature, to connect with the world, to help the weak, to help, so it's very easy to get the kid to talk about what they're interested in. My daughter loves animals, and she wants to, have a Ted Turner type like property where
Yeah.
she lets buffaloes loose and things loose, and that gets her excited. It's like, oh, I need to make Ted Turner money so I can have Ted Turner impact. And my son loves helping education, and then helping kids like learn how to build things, and so that kind of drives him. That wants he wants to make an impact that way. It's very easy to get kids,
Yeah.
because they see what opportunities are there now. Just linking those things where, listen, you generate resources, capital, whatever. They're not the goal, they're tools, and those tools help us amplify our impact, amplify our mission and our purpose.
It's really landing for me how important actually these conversations are for a child at the age of children, because life hasn't really happened to them yet in a way where their egos needs to start being defensive, and
Yes.
people get selfish and self-focused. And so being able to lay these ideas and building these practices at a level that they actually get to bring them forth through that transition, it's really awesome. About money, back to money for a second. So today on the chat, there's a lot of interesting conversation about the concept of cost of goods in a
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
And it's not just kids who don't quite get it. Like, adults really don't get that. Or even, like, it's not a cost of goods, but paying taxes. It's the same kind of thing, which is, look at all this money I made. You're like, not all yours. And so I know one of the practices that a lot of parents introduce to their kids is, okay, here's some money. Let's divide it into three categories. Here's your amount, typically like 50% that you get to spend. Here's 25% that you save, and here's 25% that you give, like as a
Yeah.
donation. So it's similar when you look at a business model. And I know what you're working is like this. Okay, here's 100% of the revenue. How much of it goes to your cost of goods? How much of it goes to your expenses, employees? How much of it goes to taxes and other things you have to pay for? How much goes to research and development and
Yeah.
marketing? And all those things are
Working capital. Yeah.
working capital. So how do you put all of that in a way that kids grasp? And what I took away from the conversation today is you kind of also let them have breakdowns about it and have childlike emotions about it, because that's also how they learn. And feelings are much more of an easy part of a child experience than adults. So what's your take on all
Yeah,
that?
it's a sequencing thing. It's an evolution. So in the beginning, all you're trying to do is to get them to pick up the bug of being entrepreneurial,
Yeah.
to be hooked on the idea that strangers are willing to exchange hard-earned money for whatever service or goods. For me in the beginning, that's all I want. I want them to get hooked on that. So I'll facilitate whatever I need to do. The unit economics is not quite, conversation is not quite there yet. In the beginning, it's just like, okay, let's figure out if do we have product market fit. So it's an evolution. So in the beginning, I'm their angel investor. We're letting them experiment and try to identify product market fit.
That's such an interesting concept, period. Like, and then it's the only thing that makes businesses be really successful, to be able to drop that knowledge, probably an easier thing for a kid to wrap their head around than an adult, in a sense.
Yes.
Like, what
Yeah.
does that person want right now that
Correct.
they would buy from me?
Yes. And
Uh-huh.
then will they pay enough money for me to make a profit? You know what I mean? So we have like a simple formula. So whatever your cost is, you need to sell it for 5 times that. So if it costs you a cookie, costs you 20 cents, you need to, you can sell it for $1, you can sell it for $2. So they're selling for $2. So it's more than, so it's like almost like 10
Mm-hmm.
times.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the goal. The goal is to get to a formula where, you could charge a certain amount and the market will not blink. People will be happy to pay. I mean, not,
Right.
you don't want to be too tight. And then, so you try different things and then eventually you settle. It doesn't have to be that many. We just need one. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you're making good enough lemonade and you can charge $5, $6 for it, you can make $1,000 in a day if you're a busy area. You know what I mean? Just lemonade. Very,
Right.
just selling ice and water and sugar.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not hard. But if you do a good enough lemonade and people appreciate your packaging and your offer, they'll charge. So in the beginning, it's product market fit. Then the next layer is the unit economics. Now we want to understand. Okay, we understand our gross margin, but now what's our overhead? How much does it cost us? To make the stuff at home. What is our labor cost? What is our electricity, water, all that stuff that goes into making the thing, not just the ingredient of the thing. So that's our overhead. So, we have variable costs, we have fixed costs. So in the beginning, we try to understand product market fit, our gross margin, then we want to figure out our fixed cost, our net margin. And then we want to understand kind of like, okay, now let's go back and tweak a little bit the pricing to figure out, can we squeeze more margin? And can we get a higher revenue? What can we do to get more revenue? And then see that growth pattern every time we're out there, we're making more money. How are we improving on that? And then now let's go back and let's figure out our capacity. How can we expand our capacity? Maybe we're a bottleneck there, expand capacity without increasing overhead too much. And then like just the nature of business, you're constantly going from working on the demand side to working on the supply side. And then in between, you get these little bottlenecks that pop up and you have to solve. And just it's an ongoing, never ending process. It's an incredible way to teach responsibility because they are in charge.
This is college level business conversations. This is MBA. This is what I work with my clients around. How much of that language do you use directly with the kids versus packaging it more in a like a kid talk?
You start out as a kid talk, but you can express the words. They may not understand them, but they'll remember them. And I try to really talk above their level. So I'm constantly like, I'll throw theory of constraints and I'll talk about bottlenecks. And then I'll teach what the bottleneck is. And then I'll give him the example based on their thing.
Got it.
And then, my daughter, she probably heard about, the book, The Goal, right here.
Uh-huh.
It's a great book, talk about theory of constraints. And she's heard about it since she was probably 7 or 8.
Yeah.
She's just read it this year. And now she says, look, I know everything. Like she told me, like, I said, what did you learn? I said, I learned nothing. You know what I mean? So this is a
Yeah.
grown up book. Look how,
Yeah.
it's a,
Oh,
it's a
that's a serious book for
serious
sure.
book. I asked her, I said, what did you learn? She said, I learned nothing.
Well, yeah. One, there's always something to learn, but two, what that tells me is yes, you've been using the real world nomenclature right
Yes,
from the get go, so that
correct.
she built familiarity with it. However, what I'm also getting is that you put it into context in a way that they can understand it. Then the deeper they get into it, the more they're just stepping right up into the clear understanding.
And
So
application as well.
right, right. They've seen it in action. They
Yes,
understand how it
yes,
works. They've been able to play with it.
yes,
So
yes.
yeah, so clearly you have significant understanding about business and entrepreneurialism. And so what was your path? Give me your history because I know it's a very interesting one, and like how it leads through all of this.
Yeah, so I grew up in Morocco. I was born in the 70s, late 70s. It was a period just like what's going on right now in the world, where there's this oil shock. We were in a very deep recession
Yeah, a lot of
worldwide
movement.
economically. So my
Hmm.
parents gonna decide. That's when they decided to get married, and I think I got a lot of like that financial stress, cortisol in my mom's womb, and so my parents didn't make it. The divorce when I was two. I went and lived with my grandparents, and then they got remarried again 5 years later and had my sister. And then 5 years later, they got divorced again. So throughout my childhood, I had like massive life uncertainty, emanating from the financial perspective a lot. So I was very cognizant of the macroeconomic environment and so forth. So as soon as I could, and I mean, I didn't have a room, I didn't have I slept on couches most of my childhood, didn't have any, certainty of anything. So early age, I remember 8, 9 year old, I would ask around, I'll ask people, hey, how much money do you spend on electricity? How much money do you spend on food, how much money you spend. And then I'll ask them at the end, I'll ask them, well, how much money do you make? And then what do you do? And so I always like lay it that way. I figured that if people like to complain about their cost of living. And then so by the time they give you enough numbers, they feel comfortable giving you how much they make. And then,
This is 8-year-old Jay figuring this
yes.
out. Okay. Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do with my life? Essentially, how do I get out of this hole? That's kind of like the idea. For me, is like, how do I get control really over my situation?
Hmm.
And so as soon as I could work, I worked. I figured, okay, money's in the bank. Let me go for work for a bank. Like literally as easy as that. So I went and I worked for a bank. I learned kind of like who makes money, who doesn't make money, who looks like they have money and who doesn't have money. And then I figured out that entrepreneurial path is the way. I did financing for businesses. I did acquisition financing. I did all kinds of working capital financing. So I understood kind of like the numbers side of business, but I wanted to be more on the operational side. So I switched from banking to manufacturing. I spent a couple of years in California working for a company there. And then I went to China. I was supposed to be there for 2 weeks. I stayed there for 5 years. And I essentially did a turnaround, which I didn't know, but I was there solving problems one at a time. And I didn't even have a visa. I was going back and forth to Hong Kong, stamping my, visitor visa every 3 months. You can't get away with it now, but I was able to get away with it back in early 2000s.
Hmm.
So that gave me a lot of confidence because my ability to transform a manufacturing business that I didn't really have any education or experience in a country with a language that I didn't speak, in a culture that I didn't know, and be able to move that business from, unprofitable to profitable, from being a mess to being organized, where people were disillusioned to be engaged and motivated, and a strong culture. That gave me a lot of confidence that okay, if I can do it here in this culture, I can do it anywhere in the world. And so when I came back post 2008, I did consulting, turnaround consulting for a lot of companies, and that's what I did. I just traveled across the country. I did some projects in Canada and Mexico and Israel, and just helping companies turn around situations, all kinds of situations, all kinds of industries. And that kind of helped, really solidify that, whatever that experience that I had in China, I could transfer to other places. And then I kind of got tired of travel. By then, I'd been living in hotels for 10 years and I wanted to get an address. So I came back to Southern California, got a place. Around the same time, met my wife, and I decided, okay, I want to be more local, less consulting, less travel, and started the company, a real estate company. got curious about real estate around the same time, and then grew that company through organically and through acquisition, and then exited that company in 2018. Worked for a while until COVID happened, and then moved to Hawaii. I retired pretty much for a few years until I got bored. Found like that I needed purpose and I needed to be more purposeful, and I didn't want my kids to see me like a beach bum, doing nothing all
All
day.
the time.
And
Yeah.
so we came back. So we moved to South Florida, and that's where I am now. And we do M&A, we do roll ups, and so forth.
The takeaway that you got that I wish more entrepreneurs really understood is, yeah, you can probably make more money, probably a lot more responsibility. You can do what you want with your time. But like the real message that is important that an entrepreneur fully understand that you have absolutely embodied is it can be however I want it to be. Like the world isn't any other way other than the one I decide it's to be. And then you follow that path. And so clearly that's how you've lived your life from a very, very early age. So what point when you got all this knowledge, all this experience, understanding how the world works, did you start to look at your kids and go, now's the time I need to impart this to them? What was that? What incentivized you or moved you in that way?
Well, I always had this desire. I always felt that, there are three types of capital that you can transfer to your kids. Most estate planners, wealth managers will tell you that you need to have a trust and you have to have this and you have to have that. But they're only talking about one type of capital, which is the financial capital. There's the intellectual capital, which is our knowledge, our wisdom, our reasoning engine. And then there is the relational capital, like the reputation, the relationship we've developed over the years.
Right.
And when you think of like, if you rank those three, you probably take the relationship first, because with relational capital, you can find ideas and you can find capital. And then with the ideas or with intellectual capital, yeah, you can do a lot with that, and probably the lowest form of capital is the financial capital to
Mm,
transfer. So I always felt that I missed having someone pour into me. I always felt that I have taken the long route to get where I got. But if someone had sat me down when I was younger and he had asked me a couple of questions and figured out what my strengths were and what I wanted to be when I grew up or what I wanted to do, they could have like given me, a much shorter directions, and they could have probably connected me with someone who's taken that path the same way.
right.
And I would have had much bigger impact on the one. Again, I'm thankful for everything. I'm grateful for what
Right.
happened, but I always felt like there was probably a shorter way.
I guess the generation of wealth really does follow that pattern, right? Everything starts with the people that you know, and more importantly, who you represent to them, like what your identity is to them. And
Correct.
that's 100% based on the quality of the relationship and how much value you're delivering and how much they trust you. And
Yeah.
then that's what opens up knowledge because we really do learn from others. And
Correct.
that knowledge helps you make really smart decisions on what it would take to generate the financial results. So I
Correct.
really like that framing. That makes a lot of sense to me. And I love the idea that those are things that we can pass down to our children and
Correct.
pass down to our employees or pass down to anybody really that we want to pour into in our lives.
100%. Yeah. So for me, I always thought, like when they're little, let's pour into them, develop the reasoning engine, give them the context, give them the stories, share with them. You
Yeah.
talk about like AI, you need more context. So we have a lot of context within us, and we have stories, and we have experiences, we have knowledge. We've taken so many routes, and then we figured out which one is better than other, and you tell them, and when they're young, they're listening to you, they're absorbing,
Right.
they have great memory, and they
Yeah.
remember everything. And so I wanted to beat that clock. And I mean, there's a certain age where like the personality kind of forms. They always say between 8 and 10, that's like from the personality character is already formed. So I wanted
Yeah.
like in that form, shaping kind of like environment, I wanted to pour into them as much as I can. And then as they get older, transition more toward relationship kind of transfer. And then part of that relationship transfer is I needed them to position themselves as value creators, as makers, not as consumers. So when they show up to somebody, when I make an introduction, now if I make an introduction for my kid to you, my kid's not going to come saying, hey, I want this, can you help me with this? They're going to say, hey, I'm working on this really cool project, I'd love to get your insight on it. That's a different ask than,
Yeah.
hey, I want this, can you help me? And I mean, you haven't done anything to help yourself, for me
Yeah.
to help you. So once you go work on XYZ and then come back and see me later. But if you are deep into the thing and you've already built something, you made something, I'm like, well, now it's interesting. Now that person that has taken the path that you took is going to think, oh my God, this kid is just 10 and he's already like ahead of
Yeah.
where I was when I was 17 or when I was 20.
100%.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And they're going to be invested in you. They're going to be
Right.
invested in your success, and they're going to like drop things and say, hey, let me help you. I can do something with
Yeah.
this. So
Yeah.
that's, for me, that's what I'm working on. I'm working on help getting them to develop enough value and enough value creation skills where when I make an introduction, it's going to be a higher conversion, if you will, a higher conversion rate.
Yeah. Well, what I'm hearing is you're teaching them to be givers,
Yes.
not takers. And you're also teaching them the art of enrollment,
Yes.
right? So when we make an ask, that ask is usually like, hey, here's what you can do for me. But an enrollment conversation is much more about me connecting to what's important to you, and then aligning those intentions. So that's who you are. I mean, that's what you're imparting upon them. And, it's a rare that a person is going to see all that and understand all that and then translate that to their children and then allow their children then to be the impact in the world. You're a rarity where you're like, I actually also want everybody I know, I want their children to also be getting that, which is, why you also pour so much into the community. So you mentioned earlier, you were talking about the identified unique, superpowers that each person naturally has and orients toward, and then you just take it upon yourself to sit down with AI and like develop an assessment so that I can, through a number of questions for kids, I can help them come up with that. So I want you to talk about that a little bit, and then also that you're developing an entire, like, a kids business school
Yeah.
education program. So
Yeah.
it's so exciting, like the impact that you're really here to make.
I totally appreciate it. I definitely feel that I think we're living through an era of rethinking everything. I think post COVID, everybody's thinking health, relationships, media, everything is being rethought from the ground up. And I think we had COVID and we had AI transformation right after it. Everybody's rethinking everything. And I think we're going into a renaissance of both education and parenting. And I think there's a lot of experimentation. So it's an exciting time. There are a lot of people that are really interested in doing things differently, going back from first principle, not doing the same thing that they've seen their parents do, which is exciting. People are leaning in. People are actually curious. They're willing to listen to new ways and new approaches, which I appreciate. I've always thought that human beings all had superpowers, and
Mm.
we all were created or came with a purpose. And we have this superpower that has a purpose, that has a goal to help, the whole, to help the society as a whole, to have an impact on the world. And the same way we talked about companies, we talk about individuals. So for me, the sooner you can identify that superpower, the better, because it allows you to kind of lean in on that thing and then find the best use, best purpose, and the most impact you can make, and the most rewarding for yourself as well and your family. So
Mhm.
usually those are, together, they're aligned. The things that just going to generate the most value in the world is going to get rewarded the most and it's going to have the most impact. So I always thought the sooner you can align yourself, the sooner you can develop, start on your 10,000 hours of mastery and then start kind of developing your life resume. So by the time you're in your early 20s, you've developed this long list of things you've done already and all these skills and all this pattern recognition and this repertoire of projects that you've put out in the world that when an investor looks at you, or an employer looks at you, or an employee that wants to work with you looks at you, they can see the track record. They can sense the knowledge. They can sense the passion. They can tell that you're not a fake. You're real. I mean, you're passionate about what you're talking about, and I want to follow you. Anybody would want to follow that person because they really care and they're really passionate, and
Mhm.
they've poured the last 10 years, 12 years into this thing. And it's just because it clicked for them early on, and they were able to go deep and go far
Right.
with that thing. And so to me, I've always felt like the sooner I can figure those things out, the better. And I can help my kids find those things, the better.
Yeah.
And the whole concept of Ikigai, which is figuring out what you're good at, figuring out what you love to do, figuring out what the world needs, and figuring out what the world will pay for. When you
Right.
have that, when those four things align, that's your Ikigai, that's your purpose, that's your zone of genius, that's your impact on the world. So that's where that started. And I created that little GPT because it's a different variation of that. When we were going to these Acton Academy business fairs, we would always notice the same kinds of kids, like the same pattern of kids. You
Mm.
have the robotics, 3D printing kids that are product oriented. You have the girls that are into like the bracelets, the jewelry, the paintings, the artistic kids. And
Yeah.
then you have the sales oriented kids that will sell like pet food and food stuff, cookies and stuff. And then you'll have the leader, the captain, who has like three girls working for her, making bracelets and making stuff, and she's the boss. So you always have these four profiles that show up. You have the leader, the salesperson, the product manager, and the systems manager. So I always felt like if a kid can figure what the profile, they're usually one or maybe two. Most adults are two because they develop
Yeah.
something else that kind of works with that. And then if they can partner with someone else who's good at something else, they can, and for me, it was a double benefit from that realization because my kids are different. So I wanted them to understand each other, understand their strengths, because obviously in a kid's partner in the business, they're gonna like conflict on all kinds of things. I mean, I want to do this, so I want to do this, so you're doing this all the time, and I'm doing this all the time. So what if we can figure out, okay, what are you good at? What are you good at? What comes easy to you? What comes easy to you? And then let's, work as like 1 + 1 = 10, not, two. So that was kind of like a double benefit to it. So I created that GPT for the parents to kind of give to their kids. But what I found is like the guys wanted to take it themselves, find out for themselves what they are. So which was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the business education. Like what are
Yeah.
you creating? Because look, it's wonderful if people want to be entrepreneurs to have this insight, not have to fail and fail and fail to figure it out. But even if people don't want to be entrepreneurs, this level of understanding of what leadership is and how we build, a mutually beneficial relationships and how business works, that's super valuable. My wish could be like if every kid could have that level of education, because we're all going to have jobs, we're all going to do work, we're all going to be engaged in transactions in one way or another throughout your life. So is such important education. So, tell me what you're putting
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, so business is an organization. It's like one of the purest form, aside from like a Formula One team. Business is like the best, the most pure form of organizational understanding or knowledge or whatever. Because through business, you can understand what's going on in your community, in your city, in your government, at your job, at your school. You can understand organizational design. You can understand leadership challenges. You can understand all kinds of things. Business is just a way to understand organizations. And so for me, every person should learn about businesses, should learn what a good business looks like, what a not good business looks like. We know some things intuitively, but we really
Yeah.
don't know specifically what the challenges are. And I think it's really important for people to understand these things. And then it makes them better citizen. It gives them more agency. So for me, the business school, the kids business school, again, it's a program that started, organically. I just wanted my kids to connect with other kids that are into starting businesses. We started with one call, and usually like 20 kids show up, And there are kids that have businesses already, and there are kids that don't have businesses. Now we start with the kids that have businesses, and we, trying to figure out, okay, what was their revenue last month? What was their gross margin? What is their net margin? And just by asking the question and getting them aware of what those things are and what their unit economics and so forth, and understand their challenges. Are they have growth challenges on the demand side? Do they have supply side issues? They have, it's fascinating. We had kids on the first call that came and said, "Hey, I have a lot of cash flow. What do I do with the money? Should I invest it in stocks or should I put it back in the business?" I'm like, that's an incredible question. I had kids that came and said, "Hey, we're like five of us. We have this car washing business, and I think one of us is stealing the money. What should we do? How do we deal? How do we deal with that?" So like incredible, like
Real
great
life is real
questions.
life everywhere. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad they're experiencing this young because they can learn how to deal with that. They can learn how to handle those situations. And nothing in life is going to prepare you for stuff like this, like small scale business. It's
Yeah.
incredible. So we start with the kids that have businesses, and we ask questions, and we find where they're stuck or where they want to go in terms of growth. And then we, ideate around the room, and then they take a list of things to do that month. And then we end with the kids that don't have businesses. And those are fun because, they're coming in, they're listening to probably like 10, 15 ideas already. So we say, okay, well, you came in. Did you have an idea before coming in? Yes, no. And then what ideas have you heard so far that piqued your interest, that you aligned with what you're interested in? And, it doesn't matter what it is, just pick the easiest one and
Yeah.
start. The goal for us is to always get the kids to take action and start. Just start anywhere, anytime. And I tell the kids, like, demand should not be an issue because you're the number one salesperson in your neighborhood. Any service or product you want to sell in your neighborhood, you're going to be the highest converting salesperson in that place. There's no, if you want to be a landscaper, there's no landscaper that's going to like take that business from you. If
You're
you
not
want
going to
to be
undercut an
a,
8-year-old.
a
Yeah.
pressure washing guy, we have kids doing all kinds of businesses. So you are the number. So demand is not your problem. So we do. We figure out, okay, what's the problem you want to solve? What are you good at? What's the problem you want to solve? Who's your target audience? How much you're going to price? And what is your channel? Are you going to door knock? Are you going to put flyers? Are you going to set a table at a
Yeah.
busy corner? Whatever that, what's your channel? And then what's your kind of like a message? What are you going to say? So someone approach your table. What do you say? You door knock a house. What do you say? And we help them kind of like just,
Yeah.
tweak that conversation in a way that delivers a higher conversion. And then we give them a goal. You have $100. You have to make $100 this week. So go make $100. And it's okay if you make 40, but I want you to set a goal to make $100. How much are you going to charge for your thing? I'm going to charge, $10. Great. How many customers do you need? I need 10 customers. Great. Well, what do you think your conversion is going to be? Oh, I don't know. So I think it's going to be 30%. Great. So I need to talk to 30 people to get 10 people to buy so I can make $100.
Right.
30 people, can you knock 30 doors? How long does it take? Oh, I don't know. Well, it'll probably take you an hour. Great.
Yeah.
Jaden, how long did it take you to door knock 100 doors? Oh, 3 hours. Okay. So if he did it, you can do it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And we have kids that
Yeah.
are like 7-year-olds that are making $200 a week. And then we have a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old that shows up and is like, well, I don't know what to do. I'm like, all right, well, look at the 7-year-old and just
Yeah.
go do the same. It's not complicated. So I think it's a combination of kids inspiring each other and essentially getting a little bit of guidance, a little bit of things, and then not having too much time between the learning and the taking of action. And then so we usually tell them, listen, you need to send a picture, like, all right, this week what day you're gonna go? I'm gonna go on Saturday. What time? I'm gonna go at 2 o'clock. Okay, great. Saturday, 2 o'clock. What do you need? I need a table and I need the product. Great. Now go do that and then take a picture and then tell us what happened. And usually we have kids that will show up and take action right away and then get hooked. We have kids that show up and get excited but never show up again. And then we
Yeah.
have kids that keep showing up, never do anything until they get so mad at everybody making money except them. And then they take massive action and they find
Yeah.
results. So
And
you have
those
just like
particular
adults.
characteristics match to those, different categories you created. What I also love about the categories is it helps them understand if they're going to take on a partner, which one of those areas would be the strongest to be to be a strength in their blind spot and vice versa.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, you don't want two sales guys running a business because they'll run out of working capital very quickly. You always want a system person and a salesperson,
Yeah.
and also gives them a sense of appreciation of others that are different than them. Because kids just like, oh no, I do this and it comes easy. Why is it hard? But people are different. There are things that come easy to you, and there are things that come hard to you. Same thing for other people. It makes them appreciate each other, and it makes them kind of like see the world differently, where they're not separating themselves from the world. They're part of, they're part of it. So
Yeah.
yeah, there are a
Yeah.
lot of learnings. It's incredible.
So many learnings. What you're doing is so valuable. I've been an entrepreneur for over 30 years, and I think it took me 10 years to learn all the things that you're teaching to kids under the age of 10.
Yes.
And I think
Same
that's the
here.
goal of like, doesn't have to be so hard, one, but also if you didn't have to make all the mistakes yourself, then you could actually just be on the path of creating value. We all learn differently, but man, accelerating to the place of value creation is an enormous contribution, not just to themselves and their families, but to the world. In the same way that, this podcast is really about dads don't have to make all the mistakes themselves, right? You
Yeah.
don't have to learn it all over the course of like 15 years and then go, here's what I would have done differently. When it's great to just be able to go, brand new dads, you can learn from all these things and just get a head start like you're teaching with the kids. And I think the other thing, maybe the end of the way, another category for that is just working on ourselves and overcoming our wounds and our traumas and healing those things and changing our internal dialogues. Like that stuff I wish I had done in my 20s. It took me a lot longer. And so, anything we can do to accelerate people's development is going to make a big impact on the world. And so I just
100%.
appreciate you
Well,
for what
a
you
lot
do.
of those trauma, psychological challenges, a lot of them tend to come from that lack of confidence, lack of identity as a young person. A lot of times it comes from not understanding your purpose, not understanding why you're here, what's the point of being here on earth. And I think when a kid has that, when you put almost like you put that engine in them, you give them that motor of like purpose and that motor of curiosity, growth. It's like the whole concept of growth and contribution, as Tony Robbins talks about the four needs, personality needs. You have, certainty, variety, significance, and love and connection. Those are psychological needs. And then you have these spiritual needs, which are growth and contribution. And I 100% believe in that. If you can put those drivers, those motors of growth and contribution in kids early on, they have this sense of appreciation because they're constantly growing, they're constantly learning, developing, and then they're constantly contributing. They're creating more value through learning, and then they're contributing on the other side. And there's a certain level of gratitude and appreciation that comes from that. There's no room for negative things. It's kind of like pouring clear water in the cup. You're constantly pouring that clear water, and there's no dirt that accumulates. The dirt it never accumulates. So that water is always clear. So I almost feel like a lot of people get in trouble, especially nowadays where there's so much abundance. There's so many resources, and then we have phones everywhere, and we have entertainment following us all the time. Kids get in
Yeah.
trouble. There's so much like negativity coming in. People are replacing going to grocery store with like a delivery and then sitting on their phone looking at garbage. And I mean, I would
Mm,
rather you go grab the groceries from the store
right.
than
Right.
sit at home looking at Facebook or
Right. See
Twitter or
what real life
TikTok.
looks like. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And I mean, that's why we do. That's what we do. We take the kids to the store every day. Everyone's like, all right, how much was the chicken today? I mean, how much per pound? How much
Yeah.
this thing is for? How much are the eggs? How much is the milk? I want them to know those things, to develop pattern
Right.
recognition for those things. And we were talking. I posted
Mm,
something earlier today about this. About our life is all paperless. We don't see bank statements. We don't see water bills. We don't see electrical bills.
cash.
We don't see tax bill. We don't see, like, everything is kind of like hidden
Yeah.
from
Like
our
even a
sight.
dollar bill, like
Yes.
cash itself.
Yeah. So I want those back. I want the paper
Mm,
back, and I want to go through with the kids. I mean, I remember I was running this facility. It was a wash facility, and we had this huge machine that consumed a lot of energy. and our electrical bill was one of our biggest expenses. After labor, our electrical bill was the most expensive thing. And I was going
Right.
through this process of reducing costs, trying to like keep this business alive. And so I was looking at this bill and I wanted to understand how our electrical bill was priced. And I literally brought in like 3 or 4 people just to explain to me how how the electrical bill, like I brought people from the Edison, California.
Yeah.
I wanted to understand it. And so we kept like tinkering until we figured out, okay, well, we don't want to turn on everything at the same time, because when you turn everything at the same time, you have this big band. And then as soon as you increase the band, you end up paying for the whole band for the whole day, or for like
Ah,
it is. So what you want your band to be small, and then that's what they're going to give you. That's what's going to become available to you, because they're going to have to make that electricity available. So you're not paying for what you're using, you're paying for what the electric company made available to you. So essentially they're forecasting what your demand's going to be, and then you're paying for that demand even if you don't use it. So I didn't understand that.
God.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
I had to
Why
like
would you?
spend,
They don't want you
yes,
to. Right.
yes. So I had to spend quite a bit of time digging into
Yeah.
the bill to understand it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not using all this electricity. Why is it going up?
Right.
So
Interesting.
I
Paying
want
for the
my kids to
storage.
learn that as early as possible, just to kind of have that concept. Not necessarily they're gonna like turn off the lights everywhere, but just understand the world, how the world works around them,
Right.
and be
Right.
curious
Right.
around about it. So
Yeah.
that's, it's fun. I think there are a ton of things you can do with kids. I think if you're intentional and if you're trying to inspire curiosity about the world, you can do that. If you're gonna try to do what everybody else is doing, or whatever your parents have done, or hide from your kids and just be on the phone and follow what's
Yeah.
easy, then you're going to get the outcome of it.
Jay, absolutely fascinating. I'm already going, let's book another one. There's so much more to cover. And we've been talking the entire time about the impact of, what do you think, the age focus that typically that sits within the Raising Lions world? I mean, it's like 7 to teens or something like that. I mean, you're kind of however old your kids get, but like
Yeah,
in
we have.
that
What do you mean?
becoming humans age, right? Once you're at
Yeah,
a child. So, what I want to finish up with is you remembering back to being a brand new dad, like with what you did and didn't know, or what you thought you knew and didn't know, and what you brought into it. You're such a conscientious person. You're somebody who really takes a great time to assess the situation and then act appropriately. So, for a brand new dad who doesn't know what they're about to step into, and remembering from your path through that, what advice would you offer to a brand new dad to be considering?
yeah, yeah. It's a great question. We have a lot of expecting dads in our group all the time. So we have a lot of kids that are born in the group
That's great.
all the time, every month. That's a great question. And the advice that I usually give to dads is to get in there and take responsibility. Don't worry about knowing or perfection in the beginning. Just, step in and take charge and help. And a lot of times dads hesitate and they have this twitch where the mom is kind of like doing the giving birth, which is like an incredible feat, and almost like the dads kind of step back and they go into follower mode as opposed to leader mode. And a lot of times it creates a confusion in that dynamic. And if it lasts for a long time, it can create problems. So I always tell them, step into leadership role, take charge. Doesn't matter what it is. Change the diapers, have the kid on your chest, sleep together, talk to the kid, take the kid away, whatever. Doesn't need to be perfect. You don't need to figure it out. Right now we have YouTube. You could watch YouTube and figure out how to, feed the kid or how to do stuff. And I mean, obviously when they're a baby, you don't feed them the mom, but you can learn stuff. You can appreciate stuff. Get involved in the pregnancy. My first kid, I made my wife eat fish. She hated fish. So I made her eat fish because I wanted my kids to eat fish. and, then, and it worked. Both kids love to eat
So,
fish.
I mean, oh
So
man,
like stuff, listen, just
yeah,
get involved, and then take charge, and then that gives you permission to later on be a leader. So if you start seeing pouches of food, if you start seeing cheese sticks, and if you start seeing those fish crackers, you can say, no, we're not going to do that. This
right,
is crap. Let's make food. Let's make real
mm,
food. That's how it starts. It starts with,
yeah,
food. It starts with Maybe I don't want my kids to have lights all over their room when they're sleeping. I want the room dark, for them to have really deep sleep. They don't need like this plastic thing. They don't need this thing. Like, you could say things when you are involved. Sometimes dads disengage because they feel like, oh, that's not something that I know that I'm good at, or whatever. They lose the plot because they disengage at first and they think they're going to re-engage later. It doesn't happen that way. They think, oh, I don't have a connection with the baby, like 18 months or whatever, so they disengage. And then they say, I'll come back when they're 6 or 7 or 8, when they can talk. You can't. It's gonna be very hard. And then also,
strategy.
the mom is figuring out. She's trying to figure it out on her own. She's gonna try to take shortcuts. She's gonna try to make life easy. And then you're gonna start seeing stuff. And then you can't come later once the nuggets, the chicken nuggets are in the menu of your kids' meals, or the phone is sitting in front of them at the restaurant or whatever. You're screwed.
Right.
You're like,
Yeah.
you lost like months ago. You can't, now it's like very hard to fix. So that's, to me, I would say, get engaged, get involved, take leadership role, and step in. I think that's what I would say.
Amazing. Jay, thank you so much for taking the time, for sharing all your insights. And I think more like just caring as much as you care and the impact that you want to make. I mean, you're making your family better, but you're making so many other families better. And I just really appreciate you for that.
Appreciate it.
So thanks so much for being on here. So Raising Lions, you got this kid's business school. People want to get hold of you. What's the best way to do that?
I'm easy to be found online. I'm in all the socials. Jay Bourgana. You can find me anywhere.
Yeah, and it'll all be spelled out on the episode. All right, man. Thank you. Until next time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Dad Manual Podcast. If you liked it, please leave us a rating or subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you really liked it, please share it with a dad you love. I'm looking to grow a community of fathers who are ready to change the world, and I need your help to do that. And if you got questions or topics you want me to explore, email them to me at thedadmanual@gmail.com. I would love to answer your questions on our next episode. Until next time, I'm Tony Cooper, and this is the Dad Manual Podcast.